So looking forward, to a good discussion on, unlocking the power of data. And, we've had, conversations around, the topics and the dimensions we'd like to cover. So the first question, and, I'll go to Saurabh first, is, we all have been, seeing about and hearing about, a lot in terms of, data, right? Various dimensions come to the fore. So I think the first question, which typically a lot of people ask is, how much of it is hype, and how much of it is, reality? So Saurabh, over to you, and then, I'll go to the others.
So it's an interesting question, Dipu, and thanks for inviting us for this distinguished panel. Definitely data is reality, and I would say AI is hype. Reason being, one way goes to the practical thing. Most of the world has learned AI and analytics through newspapers and blogs and conferences. When we go down to executing projects, what we feel is the real pain of executing it and the challenge. So analytics over the past 10 years, or I would say about 2 decades, have really spiked up, and it has been with the digital revolution coming in. So as tech came into processes, it captured the data, and using the data, people are looking to optimize it. And that's one way of looking at it. And certain places we have used AI to accelerate it. While people talk about AI, and to me, AI is using the 5 senses in any sort of our work, plus all the analytics. So to me, AI, when we say it's a superset of everything. So the hype, like when you kind of start looking at things and putting in action, is where the gap comes in. So if I share my personal experience with Lenskart, we use both AI and analytics both. We use AI to build a unique product and service, because a thing like specs is very difficult to buy. Okay. You in fact have, say, 5 pairs of your undergarments, and you have only 1 pair of your specs. And about 40% of the world needs some kind of glasses. So getting the specs right, with the right fit, with the right number and all, is very difficult. And we used AR and AI together to find the right size and to give the person an experience so that people can buy online. So that's a very practical example of AI, which almost like 25-30% of people who log on to our app try it. And that really touches the masses. But what we use analytics for is in our day-to-day operations. What customers visit, how do they buy, and how do we put in action? So the hype is where people do the talking in presentations more than doing the projects in reality. But I would say everyday things are becoming much, much more real. And as what Gartner says, there is always that curve of inflated expectations. Sometimes it is blockchain, sometimes it's metaverse, and these days it's, I think so, Web 3.0. AI has come down the curve and somewhere in the middle. So that's my perspective.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. I was actually imagining, myself, trying out specs, right? Like you said, it's an interesting one. So Debashish, if you can share your perspective, because I think the richness of our panel, comes from the diversity of industries, that we see. So similarly, if you can share, your perspectives on, this hype versus reality equation that, we see, being debated, pretty much in various forums.
Sure, Dipu. And thanks first of all, NetNext, for inviting all of us to have this rich discussion. And the best part, as Dipu mentioned, all of us bringing in various industry perspectives to this, right, makes a lot of sense. So I think, if I talk about the healthcare industry or pharma life sciences per se, I don't think it's simply a buzzword anymore. Especially in our fast-paced world of health technology, right? The healthcare industry, which has relied so much on desperate clinical trials, medical publications, patient outcome data, case stories, or treatment patterns, right, has for decades not been able to easily integrate and analyze this information in an unifying way. So this type of patient-centric data, which we refer commonly as the real-world evidence or the real-world data, are becoming increasingly instrumental in making some of the healthcare decisions, right? And RWE is becoming actionable real-world data when powered by analytics or machine learning and artificial intelligence, has the potential to help organizations, business leaders take the right decision at the right time, which translates nothing but to precision medicine, right? What we focus, every pharma company is focusing on precision decision these days. So that is definitely one of the aspects, right? Plus, if I were to call out a few use cases, right, where definitely big data has really seen the forefront is personalized treatments, right, which is the drug therapies for patients or revealing new indications for existing therapy areas. It also helps us in aiding or determining more patient outcomes, the results in efficient and cost-effective clinical trials, right? It also is helping us support the integration of disparate data sources from various healthcare systems and to form a data lake through which we can drive a lot of action-led data-driven insights and marketing. Plus, lastly, I mean, I would say one of the areas is how we reveal new markets and previously ignored patient cohorts, right, through this retrospective analysis, I would say. So that's the healthcare side of it, Dipu.
Yeah. Thank you, Debashish. I think the point that you made on, precision medicine, I think that's, very critical, given that, it's personalization in the area of healthcare, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Very much.
Yeah. Namrita, over to you. Similarly, like we said, that we'd love to hear from you, from your industry's perspective as well, in terms of how much of it is hype and how much of it is reality.
So thanks, Dipu, and thank you, NetNext, for having me here. Wearing my current hat, from a manufacturing perspective, I think I'll go back to the days when I was working more in the B2C environment. And, we used to always crave for, I'm talking about 2 decades back, we used to always crave for a singular or a unified view of our customer. And it's no different with, the manufacturing industry, because data is not something which is new to us. It may have, gone into fashion over the last decade, but the manufacturing industry has been collecting lots of data for the longest period of time, whether manually or on, in an automated manner. So we've had that. The challenge is really, about the quality of the data, the accessibility of the data, and the connectedness of the data for it to really make sense. So I think the data, the significance of the data is a reality. The hype around it is, actually what do you do with that data? The second aspect is, we all talk about data, but especially in the manufacturing sector, because where you have a lot of blue collar workers also. So what is the skill set that we've developed for actually analyzing that data or for, managing that data and working with that data? That has been something which has come to the fore. So the hype was, yes, you've got lots of data, you can do lots with that data, but the reality that shift that we're trying to make is in terms of saying, how do we actually get people on the shop floor in the business and not sitting in IT teams or in a, in a COE who are just, playing with that data. So I think that's the second aspect which comes to the fore from a manufacturing point of view when you look at data. The third aspect for me is just the speed. Of course, humans are, producing and consuming data at a never known before speed. But let me tell you, machines are not lagging far behind. The amount of data that they are, producing with the Industry 4.0 technology, especially with IoT, the amount of data that we're getting there, I think 2 aspects come into play. One is the speed, and the other is the scalability of that data. So given that context, again, the reality is that our digital infrastructure, actually equipped to handle that kind of data? What is the integration which is happening between the IT and the OT world? So those are the bits which need to be worked upon to make that promise that data has into a reality. So those are, I think that's the other aspect which we are contending with and trying to make some sense of it, so that we can actually write, this data wave and actually make it have a meaningful impact in our business. So I'll pause over there, and these were just a couple of perspectives from my side from a manufacturing point of view.
No, thank you so much, Namrita. I think, rich perspectives, from quite a few dimensions. And I think the point that you made, that when we talk about data, but what do you do with it, right? I think that's really, important. And the point that you made, that it's not about, a central COE team looking at it, but it has to be really democratized, for it to be effective. I think, those are 2 really important dimensions, and, we'll spend some time on them, subsequently. Now I'll go across to Abdel Kader, and I think it's, good to have you. One is, of course, a different industry, telecom, and you're from Etisalat, and the other is, of course, from a different market, from the Middle East. So I think from both dimensions, I think, the audience and us included, we're all very eager to hear your perspective on how do you say this, hype versus reality, conundrum.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thank you so much for the invite to be part of this panel discussion. Thank you to NetNext, to Anisha, and for you, Dipu, for taking the lead here and being brave enough to coordinate us in a structured way. And also thank you to the audience that are patient with us to enable us or to help us sharing our thought around the data. So the specific question, I guess, is if the data is a buzzword today, and if it's hype or reality, and which percentage of hype, which is percent of reality. And all my previous colleagues, they try to address from different perspective, from different industry, I would say, their point of view. I work for a telecom company, but I am on the digital side of it, on the B2B side of it. And you know that the telcos are one probably of the first and the best companies that deal with the data from the beginning, because every connection generates data. And to answer, to be more precise on my answer around the hype, I would like to remember all the audience that, this saying about the data is the new oil. It has been around. It's not something that came now. I think the one who came with this sentence is the British mathematician Clive Hamby, and I think it was in 2016. So it has been a while. The idea about the importance of data has been around with us sometimes. But to my mind, the data really has become the business currency today. Literally, with the rise of cryptocurrency for the AI, my colleagues, they are mentioning the AI part, and now the blockchain as well. We've reached, in my view, about this inflation and this curve that my colleagues was referring to, an inflection point where the data is critical element capable of transforming all the industries. And I think another example that can probably give more clarity on this point is what the Google's director of research, Peter Norvig, I think all of you know him, because he mentioned something. He said, we don't have better algorithm, we are getting more data, and that's true. Probably Google is one of the pioneers on managing the data and trying to extract value, but still across industry, and I will include my industry, the data is too often, just part of the overall picture, rather than the star of the show. And if we would like to talk about buzzword, actually, many of today's hottest technology have become the buzzword. I'm referring to AI, for example, artificial intelligence, to machine learning, or to deep learning or fake learning that are booming this day. All this promising technology, significant advance in our business, but we can see that the leaders still don't know what to do with data, and I guess we will talk about more in the next conversation around what to do with the data. The understand at some level from the business leader that this technology can offer, but not necessarily how to deploy them and to get the maximum value, maximum return of investment. So they understand the importance of data and how it managed, but is still underestimated and often, I would say, misunderstood. If you would like to look at the data part, so the foundation of all the modern technology is precisely data, either it's IoT or for example, in my domain, the 5G, we are deploying 5G for last 3 years, and probably 6G is coming soon. So all this is powered by data. Either you wanted to do the site survey to understand how to emulate your coverage around the cities, or you wanted to improve the customer experience, you need this data in order, to be able to extract this value. Just to conclude here, I think it's important to highlight that without a proper organization with this data, there will be likely a massive amount of data that goes unused. And this is a fact from my proper industry, I would say from my environment. And this waste represented a huge opportunity that is lost and can be linked to the revenue lost. In fact, I heard some numbers from the last IDC research that in general, and please understand this as an average, 68% of the enterprise data is going unused. Can you imagine the value that these companies are losing not to get the right use of the data? I will leave it here and we will continue around the other topics. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abdel. I think, 68% of data unused is clearly, food for thought, because, while everybody is talking about procuring more data, right? If you're not able to use the data that we already have, then, it becomes, real challenge. Thank you all. And I'll now, move to my, next question, which is around culture, right? Because we all have read, that culture eats, strategy for breakfast. And if to the point that even Namrita made, if you're able to get it democratized, right, down to the last person, right? So the question is, how do you basically, drive a data-centric, culture, right? And thereby, how do you become, a data-centric, organization, right? And this time, I'll start with Debashish, and then I'll, go around. So Debashish, if you can kick it off, from your unique perspective, and then I'll, take views from the others, once you're done.
Sure, Dipu. So before I divulge into Pfizer, right? Pfizer or our organization, I was reading an article some days back, which was talking about data-informed and data-driven organization. So pretty interesting, right? So if you are using things such as dashboards, KPIs, for example, right, then you are a data-informed company or an organization. Nowadays, it's very easy to be data-informed, but being data-driven means taking it to the next level. This is when you start using more intelligent algorithms and methods to get the data. Then you transform the decision-making process by using the algorithms to make informed decisions. And that is where you start the data-driven organization's mindset. You get into that mindset, right? So if I talk about Pfizer, we aim at creating a sustainable data-driven culture at Pfizer, and it begins with leadership endorsement in all forums of communication, be it via town halls, emails, videos, which sets the tone for all the executives to drive innovation and value to the organization using data. Another key challenge, right? I mean, when you speak about data is the adoption. So adoption of data requirements could vary from use of simple dashboards or tools for data analytics by the business teams, which capture key metrics and optimize decision-making process, ultimately leading to financial gains, right? That is what which is cost savings, or it can be enhanced revenue, it can be higher productivity, agility, etc. To all the way to IT/OT convergence, which is a key differentiator in digital transformation and applicable to both manufacturing and commercial excellence. At another end of the spectrum, we also have the mandatory training sessions for all employees on information security policies and practices to be followed while using and sharing sensitive information in today's innovative and collaborative environment. What is key that we have identified metrics to track adoption, non-adoption of all the above, which we have captured in monthly, quarterly team reviews. And we have made that as a practice. Like we conduct the cross-functional team meetings, we do a digital task force meetings to track adoption and adherence to these matrices. And IT/OT collaboration ensures that maintenance and operational activities are aligned so that data can be correlated across the processes.
Thank you so much, Debashish. I think, I love the point that you made on, data informed and, data centric. I think that's a good point. And similarly, the point that you made, when you're speaking about town halls, right? You spoke about multiple forms of data. I think clearly, that's one way of, driving, data centric culture, because normally when we think of data, we think of analytics and we think of some esoteric data, but I think the multiple forms, I think, that's a good point that you made. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Namrita, yeah, over to you. If you can, similarly share your perspective.
Sure. I think Debashish made a couple of very interesting points, like you pointed out, Dipu. Just building on that, we take a multi-pronged approach at Aditya Birla towards driving a data-driven culture. And that multi-pronged approach sits, if I talk about it from the top, at the group level, we have data and analytics COE. And really the role of that COE is to make sure that, they're providing the thought leadership, the advisory. They also play a huge role in terms of execution and delivery. Especially in the COVID times, when everybody was in this mode of having to change strategies and tactics, I think they were a huge, help for us at a group level. And also they focus a lot on the capability building. So that's sort of the topmost layer in some senses, so to speak. But then if I take it down to individual businesses, traditionally, IT teams will have folks with data capabilities. But I think over the last 2 years or so, what we've been really focusing on is taking it to the business teams. And when I talk about the business teams, we believe, and again, in my prior experience also, that, just providing the theoretical knowledge around data and analytics is not, going to make the needle move. And so what we do is we actually follow a model wherein a person gets trained on data and analytics when they're a part of a live project, which is, using that data. So for example, we have our central manufacturing cockpits at most of our plants. Now, these central manufacturing cockpits are all but, a repository of connected systems with throwing out data. And that is where, you have the people on the ground on the shop floors who are not just, reading the data, but also understanding it, also understanding the science behind it. And there's a full training program, which is in place to make sure that they are adept at understanding that. Of course, then there are more complex programs, in terms of integrated business planning. And again, over there, you're looking at, building up these kind of capabilities on live projects, because the intent is really, how do you make that shift happen from an IT or a technology or a digital team to the business team. And so with this build, operate, transfer kind of a mindset, what you're doing is you're enabling them on a project where you're hand holding them. But after a certain point in time, depending on, whatever has been pre-decided, you actually then let the business team run with it. And so when they have that ownership, when the data becomes their responsibility from a KPI perspective, from a reporting perspective, every morning at the morning meeting, like Debashish said, and at town halls, I think it starts driving the culture inherently. So that's sort of, the approach that we are taking at our end.
I love that, build, operate, transfer model, Namrita, so you're doing a bot on a bot, right? I think, that's kind of interesting. Yeah. Abdel, we'd love to hear from you, in terms of, how in your firm, you're going about, building a data-centric culture.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to highlight that I like the way my colleague explained the difference between data-driven strategy or data-driven organization versus data-informed. And that distinction, we need to understand the background of that. So the background basically is because in the recent years, there was an exploding quantity of data that have the potential to create new use cases, create innovation for the companies, bringing new ideas with solid evidence. And this evidence, whenever we talk about this with different stakeholders in the organization, they saw the data that helps in better satisfying customer or streamlining the operation or clarifying the strategy or probably looking for efficiencies within the organization. And in the past years, these firms, these organizations have amassed a lot of data in the last decades. They invested in technology to deal with this data. And even I would say they paid generously a big amount of money for analytics talent, and especially now with these new skills around data scientists and data engineer. But yet for many companies, have this data-driven culture that my colleague was explaining still remains elusive, and data are rarely the cornerstone for making decisions. So the question here, and I think if our audience would like to hear why is that happening? What is so hard to make a company, an organization data-driven? I think there was a study from Oliver Wyman in a range of industry that indicate that the biggest obstacle to create a data-based or data-driven business wasn't technical. There was more cultural things. So I think that's the important finding. It's easy, it's simple to describe how to inject data to a decision-making process or to connect the different data source, but it's far harder to to make this is a normal part of the overall strategy of the company, or even to make it automatic for employees, either to consume it or to use it or to provide more data. So a shift in mindset that present this challenge is what the company needs to look at. Probably based in our experience here in the region, talking to many customers that they have this vision to be data-driven, and from our own organization, I think we can easily distill some important elements, data, or I would call it commandment, to help to create a sustainable culture with data in its core of this organization. I think the first one, and I think my previous colleague has touched point about how they manage to have a top-level engagement. I think data-driven culture start at the top, at very, very top. And I think the example is set by a few at the organization on top, and they can catalyze substantial shift within their their company with a wide norm. I think this is very critical if you wanted to make that change. The other thing that you need to look at, because when you have a lot of data, there is a lot of things to look at. I think you need to choose carefully your metrics. What are the metrics that you wanted to look at, and to be very clever in choosing that. I will give you an example from my industry, from the telco operator. For example, we are leading in this region, probably in more than 16 countries where we have footprint. So if we wanted to ensure that our network provide a key customer with the best possible user experience, but find out that we, when we gather, for example, the statistic or aggregated data from the network, and the statistic are in aggregated form. So we knew probably a little about how we receive this data, how service quality, how customer interact, how they experience that. But if we created the detailed metrics on, for example, on customer experience, how the operator are coming to us when they use our service, we can make a quantitative analysis about the impact and the consumer impact of the network that we do. I was mentioning, for example, that the Expo 2020 is running right now, and this was the first place in the earth where we have 5G coverage. So when we do that in network upgrade, we would like to know how customers are interacting that. So choosing carefully this metric, I think, is another important element. And there are many other elements, but I'm trying to squeeze them in probably the most important one. The third one can be this effect of, they call the pigeonhole of data scientists. Data scientists are scarce resources, so please don't typecast them. Companies that are leading edge in this data-driven organization, they need to drag their data scientists closer to the business. They need to pull the business toward data scientists. And this is aligned with the point one, where you have a top-down strategy around data culture. I think if you start looking at these elements, you will have probably an effective data strategy. And to conclude, I would say, understand your data currently, what are the methods that you wanted to choose carefully. Make sure that everyone in the organization understand where the data resides and how they can get benefit of it. And this is, again, is the top-down strategy around leading the CDO role or something similar. And finally, remember what I mentioned before in the previous intervention around the waste data. Don't let your data go to waste. If you are using 1/3 part of it, be careful. You realize that you are losing a lot of value. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abdul Kader. I think the point that you made on mindset shift, I think that's the critical aspect of culture. And like you said, top down, right? The tone at the top, needs to find its echo at the bottom. I think, that's how you drive it enterprise wide. I'd just like, Saurabh to share his perspective on, driving, data-centric culture. And then, we'll go to the, the final part of the, conversation. Yeah, Saurabh, over to you.
So Dipu, it's interesting, after three people talking, I'm not left with any answers. The best way is to summarize. But, I have kind of worked in Amex and Tata and Motherson Sumi, and now in startup in Lenskart. So I've seen different stages of adoption of analytics, and I'm seeing a very different mindset here. Really seen it, the thing which Abdul mentioned, that it starts from the top. Many of us might have seen Piyush in Shark Tank, but I've seen him being such a data-driven person. In fact, every VP or above has to go through a simple analytics interview round. So about 2-3 months back, I started, we were looking for HR heads, and I started interviewing them for basic analysis, because can they understand incentive numbers? Can they understand attrition numbers? Their basic math skills are there, which was a big change to me. And that is so important, because, it's the balance of left brain and right brain. That's one thing. And many times, data comes after the project, analytics comes after the project is done. In many places I've seen where traditional companies are trying to adopt analytics. They will say, okay, why don't you set up an analytics and then try to tell us what you do. What here I found is very interesting is it starts with data first. And I'll tell you one small example. And it happens mostly in pricing. Okay. Every day we try different experiments of pricing, that what's the right price at which we should acquire new customers, what's the right price we should run Valentine's Day offer, what's the right price you should think through Holi, and doing that adjustments to see what's the uptick we get. And especially with e-commerce, pricing is a big one. But I would say at our place, we have done it in all the places, whether it is HR, operations, logistics, whatnot. But it really starts from the top. And then adopting a framework like the OKR framework, which is your objective key results framework, which Andy Grove had institutionalized in Intel back in 1960s, is a wonderful framework to measure the performance of the company and build the dependencies. So that really helped us take it to the next level and make it the real culture, because with the initiatives objective, the key results and the tracking makes it the culture. So the culture is not about culture till it's measured, and what measure is matters at the end, and that tries to get improved. So yeah, that is my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. I like the 2 aspects that you bring in. One is measurement, because as I say, what you measure is what you manage, right? Even if it is culture. And the other is, this combination of left brain and right brain. I think in the quest for data, sometimes, we tend to focus only on one aspect. So I think that's a very critical, dimension that you brought in. So we have, 10 minutes left, and then, we'll just go to the next question. So it's like saying, we moved from the main course to the desert, right? So we request all panelists to, share crisp answers. And this is around, there are 2 parts of the question. The first is around, security. It goes without saying that any discussion on data, is incomplete unless you discuss security aspect. In others, if you do, crystal ball gazing, right? And if you take a look at the future, what do you see, are the key kind of trends emerging, in this space? So let me kick it off with, Namrita, and then, I'll, move on to the others. Yeah. So Namrita, over to you.
Thanks, Dipu. So let me do the crystal ball gazing first, and then I'll come to your question on security. So, from a crystal ball gazing perspective, if I can go back to something that most of us should be familiar with, Jeff Bezos had said a long time back that, in the boardroom or in any meeting room, you have all the chairs and then you have one empty chair, which is for the customer. I see the future having one more chair in the room. And this will be for AI, data and AI, because this will be the volume, the velocity, and the variability of data that we are seeing. It is going to be beyond the human mind to comprehend that and do effective decision making at some point in time. And therefore, you're going to need to depend on the AI crunching that data in real time and giving you a decision which is hopefully more informed and a better decision for the organization. So that's a little bit of the crystal ball gazing that I would say. The second aspect in terms of the security, I think when we start looking at, Abdul had talked about blockchain. I think the key challenge with all of our data that we are bringing out is twofold. One is from an individual perspective in terms of data privacy, which comes into play. And we have, in this organization, an operation across 5 countries in terms of manufacturing, but we've got customers who sit across 90 plus countries. So when you're looking at that kind of play, the data privacy norms and the laws are different across each region. And I'm not going to delve into a lot into that, but those, one has to be mindful of those when one is looking at managing data across that kind of a footprint. From a blockchain perspective, I think it's a point of view of, we started using blockchain. Again, this was before my Aditya Birla days in 2016, I think was when we first started doing some applications around it. So 5-6 years back, but the intent really was at that point in time, how can we get greater trust and transparency across the ecosystem? Because we are now working increasingly, and post-COVID it has become even more rampant, that we are working in an ecosystem. And therefore it becomes important to have that agility and that transparency. And if I come back to the manufacturing industry, we are in an industry which, where chemicals, for example, are extremely hazardous in nature as a product. When you're looking at the traceability of those or the tracking of those in real time, and I go back to COVID for 2 minutes, and we had, tonners and we had trucks which were sitting with chemicals on the roads. So you do need an application like blockchain, along with a whole host of other applications, to make sure that you're getting the data to be able to manage what could be, a potential risk, not just to humans, but even to the environment. So that is one aspect. And the other aspect, of course, I touched upon briefly is the IT/OT security. So I think we are revisiting our architectures over there. We are looking at that in a lot of detail, because I think there was a lot of focus on IT security, but that's changed again, just given the focus on the OT side over the last 2 years or so. I know we're running out of time, so I would have loved to delve a little deeper, but I'll just leave it at that and let my peers also share their perspectives.
No, thank you, Namrita, and I appreciate that. I think we have just about 4-5 minutes left. So Abdul, if you can just share in a minute, quickly your perspective.
Yeah, sure. I understand that we are running out of time. So very quickly, trying to address both questions in 1 minute. The first one around probably the trends or the emerging trends that will be key in the next 5-10 years. I would say we have to separate in 2 aspects. One, the proper technology that will be generate more data. Artificial intelligence, my colleague mentioned the machine learning and all this algorithm. The Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things, more sensors, more data, more beacons. The big data and augmented analytics that is happening as we speak in my industry, the 5G, the 6G, we are talking about peta and zeta byte of data. The blockchain also with the NFTs will be generating more data, and probably the increasing merge between physics, the quantum physics, and the machine learning, which is called the quantum machine learning, is also booming and will be generating more and more data with more computing power. This is one trend in terms of technology, but the other thing very important is around the trends about data science. And the data science, we'll see another trend, which is probably better naming conventions. And this is more linked to the data scientist. Data scientist has been a big issue for many industries, mainly because of the ambiguity. They don't, around their role, it's not very clear and entails many use cases or many companies need. Although I believe that the job description now probably is largely becoming more clear and concise, and people they know how to do that. So we will have more clarity on that, which we call the naming conventions. The other one is the use of application or the sustainable ecosystem of application outside the technology industry. So far, a lot of people are using AI and machine learning, but the adoption is very driven by use case or driven by models and algorithms rather than a full-fledged application. And the last one is the data-centric model. I think Andrew NG has created a new initiative this year, the end of last year, beginning of this year, called data-centric modeling, because many people were focusing more on modeling rather than the data. That's on the aspect of the trends. On the aspect of security, I think my colleagues covered all of it. I think data security, ensuring that the data is classified according to their sensitivity, defining the process that has to govern this, safeguarding information, preventing data loss and leakage, is only one aspect from the data governance. I think you need to look at the whole data governance, from data quality, ensuring the data is correct, availability of this data, usability of this data, integrity of data, that the data retain essential quality of what was stored for. I think this would be my contribution. I'm concerned about the time, so I will leave it here and hand it to you.
Thank you so much, Abdul. I'll just go across to Saurabh. Saurabh, maybe in a minute, because we just have about 2 minutes left.
So I think so I'll just touch upon one part, as there's a famous saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And this whole free economy, when we are using WhatsApp to call people, and then WhatsApp uses our information to target ads, when we are going for free gaming, all these things data will be monetized as a business model. Okay, when we are doing a UPI payment, credit, the entire business model is on lending. We do free payments and we get things. So customers will have to pay the price of the monetization, while the companies have to responsibly use the data by the right disclosures. So that's an aspect from a consumer perspective, just in addition to what everyone said, I would like to highlight.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. Appreciate, you're being crisp. And Debashish, similar challenge for you, just a minute, because we actually
I promise I'll keep it under 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So I think bringing the healthcare side, right? So privacy definitely matters. And in healthcare, we are already used to dealing with data privacy for health data. But when we talk about data sources from outside the clinic, right? Suddenly we don't have that same straightforward regulatory frameworks in place. And hence 3 points, right, which we practice normally is first, which Namrita already touched, which is first and foremost is the region-specific regulations like the GDPR we have the CCPA, and from an India standpoint, we have PDP. The second is the personal data management, right, which is very, very core. So we should have the right user consent in place, usage of systems that helps us get it using web forms, CRM systems. And the last is the UX piece. So how you manage this entire consent gathering, right? The opt-in forms, the opt-out things, privacy and terms and policies defined, the data privacy things very well defined, and how do you unsubscribe, options given to patients to unsubscribe at the right point in time. So, I mean, these are some of the things which we should take care, because a lot of this data is patient-centric, which is highly sensitive.
Yeah, thank you so much, Debashish. Again, thanks for being crisp. There's one question from Raghu. He said that Abdul spoke about a top-down approach to data-driven organizations. So as a CIO, how does one bring about this change? I'll quickly, answer this. So I think the point is first, involve stakeholders, ensure that, the various heads are involved, from the entire, analytics and data landscape. The other is figure out the right use cases. The third is ensure that, you build this culture of, taking it right, down to the person who's closest to the customer and the process, so that the the tone at the top has an echo at the bottom. And I think once you do that and you learn and you go forward, you'll be able to drive that. And, back to you, I'm happy to say that, we finished on time without compromising on any of our questions. And we also answered the audience question. So thanks to everyone. We covered everything and, bang on the dot. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dipu, for taking us through this very well-structured discussion. We've got so much information in the set time. I want to thank all our speakers for taking the time out and joining us today and sharing with us their perspectives, their experience, and what they think will work in the future. Thank you, Namrita. Thank you, Mr. Kader. Thank you, Saurabh and Debashish. And thank you so much, Dipu, for conducting this discussion.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.